Okay, so here's a quick starter guide to the Nimzo Larsen opening. Starts with b3. Most of the time we'll see e5. I'm going to go ahead and attack that pawn. Black defends, pushing e3 to prep our next move, which is bishop b5. So obviously the idea is we're attacking the defender of the pawn in hopes of grabbing it at some point down the line. Here we see a couple of moves, potential moves from black, but most often we'll see bishop d6. And my preferred move in this position is knight e2. And the general game plan is that after a6, which might happen on move 5, might happen later, we're going to trade on c6. We're going to push our d pawn after castles. Really anything that black does, we're going to develop our remaining knight. We want to castle ourselves. And if allowed, we're going to go ahead and push e4. We might see something like a5 at some point. We can just meet that with a4. We might see black start to try and bring their pieces over to the queen side for an attack. We can do the same on the king side. And we also want to push f4 at some point. Maybe we see bishop c5 trying to pin this pawn. We undo that with king h1, and then, like I said, eventually we push the f pawn. So that's the general idea. We only have our dark squared bishop, and that's the reason that we want our pawns on light squares, so that we can just increase the power of that bishop. Let's take a look at another example here. So here, instead of bishop d6, we might see d6. And if we see that, we're just going to go ahead and push d4. A lot of times black will take because what they want to avoid is allowing d5. That would be very bad for black's position. So after takes, I like to recapture with the queen here. Most likely what we'll see is black undo that pin so they can put a tempo on the queen, but we're going to go ahead and trade here. This pawn is under attack, so we want to defend and develop. We'll most likely see bishop e7 here. We can develop our last minor piece, castles. We can castle long here. We're going to want to bring our rook to the e file so that eventually we can go ahead and push e4, kind of similarly to our last example. Okay, let's go back to this position. So sometimes we won't actually see knight f6 from black. Sometimes we'll see d5, which is a very logical move, taking more center space. And our game plan generally remains the same. We're going to try and attack the defender of the e pawn and win that pawn. So what will we see here from black? Well, most likely bishop d6. And here I like bringing the knight to f3. There are a lot of lines where white will play f4, and in lower level games you're going to see people capture here all the time, and we can win the rook, win the pawn. But at higher levels, you're not really going to see that, and I think there are a lot of interesting positions that come from knight f3 here. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So knight f3 attacking the pawn. Most likely we'll see queen e7 defending. And here, the move that I like to play is d3. And after something like knight f6, d4. So why d3 instead of just d4? Well, if you push d4 right away, you might run into e4. And after knight e5, you've got queen g5, which is just a nightmare. Reason being, we're attacking this pawn, and if you think you can castle and defend and king safety, all that good stuff, you're wrong, because bishop h3 is coming. And this is just a deadly, deadly move. In this position, it turns out white's best move is king f1, and I'm just not comfortable playing this position, so I avoid it. And sort of giving black another developing move often prevents us from seeing that queen g5 threat. So now, if we see e4, we can go knight e5 without the threat of queen g5. And here maybe we see castles. And really, at any point, if black undoes the pin that we have on this knight, we're going to capture, right? So takes, takes, takes. Black may undo the pin instead of castling here. Still, we're going to take. What else might we see here? Okay, well, let's go back to just after d4. If black captures here, we can recapture with the knight. And it's sort of the same story. If black undoes the pin, we're just going to go ahead and capture. Same deal here, right? Something to consider, I guess, is that if we capture here and instead black captures with the pawn, for example, we'll just retreat our bishop. No big deal. Cool. So now let's take a look here at another example where if instead of taking that, now we're venturing into the territory where the positions don't end up equal. This is where black starts kind of making mistakes, let's say. And in this example, um, let's say instead of pushing e4 or capturing on d4, black plays what seems to be kind of a logical move, just right? If we see the pin undone, the general rule we've been talking about is we're going to capture. And at first glance, it seems very logical to just recapture here, but now we run into e takes e5. And now black is in real trouble, as you can see. This pawn is well defended by the knight, and basically black has to decide which piece they're going to lose. There's a line here where black plays bishop b4 check, and after c3, black decides that they're going to try and save their knight. So we capture, recapture. Black may believe that they have some compensation with these tempos, but we can block check. And after something like bishop a6, we've got this devastating bishop a3 winning the rook. Similarly, go back a few moves. If black undoes the pin with bishop d7, and we take and we get this recapture, again, we've got d takes e5. It's a very, very similar position. So while this, I wouldn't call this really a very sharp opening or position, there are some seemingly logical moves that black can play that will actually get him in a lot of trouble. And this is really just kind of scratching the surface here. There's one more thing that I forgot to cover, which is after d3, I'm just remembering, what if we don't see knight f6 and instead we see something like bishop d7? Here, again, the pin has been broken, let's capture. That's the general rule. So if takes with the bishop, then we can go ahead and play d4, and we're safe from the bishop's influence coming eventually here. So if we see queen g5, we can actually go ahead and castle here because um, bishop h3 isn't an option because the bishop is here. However, if black decides to recapture with the pawn, now we actually probably want to just push e4. And this is a very playable position. This avoids, the knight getting chased off of this square on f3. And that is the quick starter guide to the Nimzo Larsen opening.